For centuries, we've been told a pretty straightforward story about human history. We crawled out of caves, figured out fire, invented the wheel, and just slowly built the world we know today. But what if that story isn't the whole story? What if it's a lie of omission? 6,000 years ago, in the land of Sumer, the world's first great urban civilization didn't just write poetry. They recorded a history of humanity so strange, it's been mostly ignored. They wrote that we aren't the masters of our own destiny, that we were created, not by some distant, ethereal god, but by beings of flesh and blood who came to this planet with a plan for us. And maybe, just maybe, that plan is still unfolding. The story we all learn in school is one of slow, steady progress. For the vast majority of our time on Earth, our ancestors were hunter-gatherers. Then, around 10,000 BCE, we figured out agriculture. This led to permanent villages, which grew into towns, and eventually, cities. We're told this was a long, messy march of trial and error. That civilization was just a lucky accident. It's a simple and frankly comforting story. But the archaeological record itself shows us a moment when the long, slow climb of humanity suddenly kicks into high gear, and that moment happens in ancient Mesopotamia. In the sun-scorched plains of what is now Iraq, something incredible happened. Archaeology shows a long, gradual development through preceding cultures like the Ubaid and Uruk. But around 4000 BCE, the civilization we call Sumer represents a stunning acceleration of complexity. This wasn't just another step, it was a quantum leap in cultural technology. Here, the Sumerians gave the world a list of firsts, so long it's hard to explain. They developed one of the world's first true writing systems, cuneiform, to record everything from laws to epic poems. They established what many consider the world's first true city-states, like Uruk, a sprawling metropolis with tens of thousands of people. They laid the foundations for a legal tradition that would later produce codes, like the famous Code of Hammurabi. The sexagesimal system they developed, counting in 60, is the reason we still have a 60-second minute, a 60-minute hour, and a 360-degree circle. Their astronomical observations, built upon by later Babylonians, were the most advanced of their time. Mainstream history tells us the Sumerians figured all of this out themselves, but that begs the question, how? How does a society go from large villages to complex urban life with such incredible speed? The Sumerians had an answer, and it's written on thousands of clay tablets. They claimed they didn't invent this knowledge, it was given to them. When we read the Sumerian tablets, we aren't just reading mythology, we're reading what they considered their own history. According to these stories, long before humans existed, Earth was inhabited by powerful beings. Later, Mesopotamian texts, like the Atrahasis epic, identify these beings as the Anunnaki Council of Gods, and tell of a problem. A group of younger gods, the Igigi, were forced to do all the physical labor, digging canals, tilling the land, and they were exhausted. They revolted. Their leaders needed a new workforce. The myths describe a council meeting. The high god Anu agrees the work is too much. His brilliant son Enki proposes a solution. Let us create a simpler being, a Lulu Amelu, a primitive worker, to take over the burden. The texts are strangely specific. A god is sacrificed, and his blood is mixed with clay. From this mixture, the first human is formed, shaped in the likeness of the gods. Humanity's purpose was clear from its very first breath: to serve, to be a planet of workers. These aren't just vague parables. They are detailed narratives that describe creation happening not in some mythical void, but in the fertile plain between two rivers, the symbolic heartland of Sumer itself. For over a century, Assyriologists have read these texts as powerful religious myths, symbolic stories about the human condition and the divine order of their society. The Anunnaki are understood as a pantheon of gods born from the human imagination. But in 1976, an author named Zecharia Sitchin offered a shocking alternative. What if the myths weren't myths at all? What if they were a literal record? Sitchin, a deeply controversial figure, claimed the tablets told the story of extraterrestrial visitors. He argued the Anunnaki were beings from a hidden planet in our solar system he called Nibiru, with a massive 3,600-year orbit. He claimed they came to Earth hundreds of thousands of years ago to mine gold, which they needed to repair their atmosphere. When their own workers revolted, they used their genetic expertise to upgrade Earth's native hominids, engineering Homo sapiens as slaves. In actual Babylonian astronomy, Nibiru is a term for the planet Jupiter, or a celestial crossing point, not a wandering home world. And yet, Sitchin's ideas just won't go away, because even if his story is wrong, he tapped into a question the tablets themselves seem to pose. If humanity was designed, what was the rest of the plan? The Sumerian king list famously states that, quote, kingship descended from heaven, quote. This was a powerful idea, a top-down hierarchy, where a king serves as the middleman between the gods and the people. He was the chief servant, managing the labor of all the other servants. This structure of top-down authority, bureaucracy, and law was the perfect solution for managing a huge workforce, and it is an operating system we have seen copied, modified, and rebooted in countless civilizations ever since. But their myths hint that the plan went deeper. The myth of Adapa tells of a man created by the god Enki. He's granted incredible wisdom, but is then tricked into refusing the bread and water of life, losing the chance for immortality for himself and all of humanity. It's easy to read this as a story about deliberate sabotage, a way to ensure that humanity would always be smart enough to work, but never powerful or long-lived enough to challenge its creators. So, could it be that the core parts of our civilization, labor, debt, law, top-down government, are more than just social developments? Could they be echoes of an ancient system of control, installed at our very beginning to keep us productive and in our place? Later Babylonian texts, drawing on Sumerian traditions, tell of 7 mysterious beings called the Apkallu, or the 7 sages. These beings were said to have emerged from the sea before the Great Flood. The Greek writer Berossus, retelling these much older legends, described them as bizarre fish-human hybrids. Their job was not to rule, but to teach. The legends say the Apkallu gave humanity the foundations of civilization, writing, law, geometry, and architecture. After their mission was complete, they returned to the sea. The story is so striking that even Carl Sagan, while stressing there was zero hard evidence for ancient alien contact, noted that the legend of Oannes, the first Apkallu, was a case that deserves more careful study. He saw it as the kind of myth we might expect to find if contact had occurred, while always emphasizing the complete lack of proof that it ever did. So what were the Sumerians describing? Were the Apkallu a mythologized memory of a more advanced neighboring culture? Or were they, as the legends seem to suggest, something else entirely? A third party intervening in the development of a species that was not their own? We're left with 2 very different stories about our origins. One is a story of slow, undirected evolution and cultural development. The other is the one the Sumerians themselves wrote, a story of intervention, of creation with a purpose, and a destiny given to us by beings far more advanced. The phrase genetic engineering is modern, but their description of mixing a god's essence with clay to create a new species in their own image sounds eerily familiar. The scholarly consensus, based on all available evidence, is that these are foundational myths, not literal history. Philology, archaeology, and comparative mythology all support this view. They haven't chosen to dismiss an alternative. They have followed the evidence, and they may be absolutely right, but the artifacts are still there. The texts still exist. The Sumerians laid the foundation for the world we live in, from how we tell time to how we structure our governments. They emerged with a blueprint for civilization that appeared with a startling and influential swiftness. Perhaps the LIE of history isn't that the conventional story is wrong, but that it's incomplete. It leaves out the incredible story our ancestors tried to tell us about who we are and why we're here. And that leaves the ultimate question. If we were created for a purpose, is that purpose finished? Or are we still living out a plan set in motion 6,000 years ago, just waiting for the next part to begin?